She left me for his Rolls Royce. And I didn't even know it was mine. That was how everything unraveled. The woman I had spent 5 years of my life with, planning a future, sharing my heart, had just walked out the door with another man. Not just any man, but her ex. And not just any car, but a stolen car, my car. A Rolls Royce that had been mine, until it wasn't. It all happened so fast. 1 minute, Elena was in my arms, telling me how much she loved me, how excited she was about our wedding, and the next minute, poof. Gone. I stood there, staring at the empty apartment, still holding her favorite coffee mug, trying to piece together what had just happened. It didn't make sense. Why would she leave me, a man who had supported her every dream, who had built a life together with her, only to run back to the same man who had hurt her before? Gabriel, her ex. The man she swore she would never speak to again. And there she was, leaving with him. But there was something I didn't know. Something that no one would tell me. That damn Rolls Royce wasn't just a symbol of wealth and success. It was stolen. And the worst part? It was stolen from me. From the dealership I worked at. I had no idea at the time. I thought it was just her making a poor choice, but as the night wore on, the truth started to set in. This wasn't just a betrayal of love, it was a betrayal of trust, of everything I had built. She didn't just leave me. She took my future. She took my life. And she didn't even care. What Elena didn't know was that I wasn't just going to let it slide. I wasn't going to sit idly by and let her run away with my heart, my trust, and, now, my stolen property. I had a plan. A revenge so sweet, it would make her regret every second she spent with that man and his stolen Rolls Royce. And it started right then. Right there, with me alone in the dark. Elena and I met in college. It wasn't love at first sight, but it was close enough. She was the type of woman who could light up a room with a smile, the kind of person who didn't need to try hard to stand out. Smart, ambitious, and fiercely independent, she had always kept a certain distance from people, especially men. She was the type who wanted to carve her own path, and for a long time, I admired that about her. It made me feel like I was special, like I was the one she chose to lower her guard for. We hit it off from the start. I was drawn to her passion, her fire, and the way she could talk about her dreams with such intensity. I was an aspiring entrepreneur back then, trying to get my start in the business world, and Elena was the kind of partner I needed, supportive, driven, and ambitious. We were a perfect match, or at least, I thought we were. Our relationship wasn't without its struggles, though. At first, we fought about small things, misunderstandings, egos, differences in goals. But we always managed to work things out. We would talk through our issues, and I thought that was what made our connection so strong. She was more than just a girlfriend to me. She was my best friend. My equal. But like any couple, we had our ghosts. The biggest of them being Gabriel. Gabriel was her ex. The one who had been in her life before me. The one who had left her broken and distrustful of love for a long time. I knew about him, of course. Elena had told me all about him in the early days of our relationship. He was the one who had cheated on her, the one who had used her, the one who had left her in pieces. She had told me how badly he had hurt her, how much it had affected her trust in men. For a while, I thought I was the antidote to that pain. But I was wrong. She always spoke of him with a mix of anger and sorrow. I'd never seen her so vulnerable when she talked about him. It made me wonder what was still left between them, something unspoken, lingering beneath the surface of her carefully curated walls. But I never asked, because I trusted her. Trust was the foundation of our relationship, and I believed in it wholeheartedly. However, things started to change slowly, almost imperceptibly, as the years went by. I began noticing small details that didn't add up. The late nights when she was working late, the sudden bursts of silence when I brought up our future, the way she would stiffen whenever Gabriel's name came up in conversation. It wasn't much, but I felt it, like an electric current running beneath everything. Then came the night of the trip, the vacation we had planned to celebrate our anniversary. The one where we were supposed to reconnect, to talk about the future, to solidify our life together. But something shifted on that trip. Elena became more distant. Her attention wasn't fully on me. She started to withdraw in subtle ways, checking her phone more often, getting lost in her thoughts. It was during that trip that I first felt it. The shift. The crack in our seemingly perfect relationship. I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was just the stress of wedding planning, the pressure of trying to figure out life after college, the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. But deep down, I knew something was off. Still, I never expected her to leave me like this, not like that. With him. With Gabriel. It wasn't just the fact that she left me. That hurt, yes. But it was the way she did it, the coldness, the detachment. She didn't even look back. As if everything we shared, all those years, meant nothing. I thought we were building something real, something solid, but now it felt like it had all been a game. A lie. But what stung the most was the way she didn't even seem to care. It was clear now that Gabriel had been in the picture far more than I realized. Maybe their breakup hadn't been as final as she led me to believe. Maybe I had been the one kept in the dark. Or maybe I was just too trusting, too naive to see what was happening right in front of me. As for me, I was left standing in the wreckage of my own life. The woman I had loved was gone, taking with her my heart, my dreams, and my future. The only thing left was a bitter emptiness. But that emptiness fueled something in me. A need for answers. A thirst for justice. And that's where the Real story begins. It's not just about betrayal. It's not just about Elena leaving me for another man. It's about the truth. About the lies, the deceit, and the web of manipulation I was only beginning to untangle. The truth was, Elena wasn't the only one who had been playing a game. And Gabriel? He had his own dark secrets. I wasn't done with them yet. Not by a long shot. It was 3 days after Elena left when I finally did it. I couldn't stay idle anymore. My mind raced with questions, all begging for answers. How could she leave so easily? How could she just abandon everything we built for some shiny car and a man who'd broken her once before? I'd spent those 3 days pacing around my apartment, drowning in a cocktail of anger and heartbreak. But one thing gnawed at me more than anything, her ex, Gabriel. There was something wrong with this whole picture. Why had she left me for him? Why had she chosen a man who was supposed to be nothing more than a painful memory? I didn't have any answers, so I started looking for them. I went through her phone records, her messages, anything I could get my hands on. The result? Nothing. Elena was too careful. Too smart. She had covered her tracks well. But then, as I was sitting in her office, going through some of her old paperwork, I stumbled upon something I wasn't prepared for. Hidden among the pages was an envelope, sealed tight, with the word "private" written in bold letters. My first instinct was to tear it open without a second thought. But something made me hesitate. What if this was a mistake? What if it had nothing to do with her betrayal? But I couldn't ignore it. I opened the envelope, my fingers trembling. Inside was a set of pictures, printed out, neatly arranged like a scrapbook. The first picture made my stomach churn. It was Gabriel, sitting behind the wheel of a Rolls Royce. A car I'd recognized instantly. A car I knew all too well. That's when the truth hit me like a ton of bricks. The Rolls Royce that Elena had ridden off with wasn't just some symbol of wealth and status, it was stolen. And not just any car. My car. The one I had been working on for months, the pride of my dealership, a car I had poured my blood, sweat, and tears into. Gabriel had stolen it from me. He had taken something that I worked so hard for, and I had no idea. But there was more. The pictures showed Gabriel's interactions with a man I didn't recognize. Someone I later learned was connected to a criminal underground network. That's right, Elena had gotten involved with someone who wasn't just a rich guy with a stolen car. She had crossed a line I never could have imagined. The worst part? She had known. She had known Gabriel was behind all of this, she had even helped him. I stared at the photos for what felt like an eternity, every second making my blood boil even hotter. All this time, while I was building a future with her, she was involved in something far darker. And she hadn't just betrayed me by leaving me for him, she had lied to me about everything. She had been feeding me stories about Gabriel, stories that I believed, stories about how he had wronged her. Yet all along, she had been helping him, playing me for a fool. I remember the first time I confronted her about Gabriel. She had looked at me with such innocence, such conviction, telling me there was nothing between them. "He's in the past, baby," she said, her voice soft and convincing. "I've moved on." Now, standing in that empty office, holding the damning evidence in my hands, I realized how deeply I had been deceived. Elena hadn't just lied to me about Gabriel, she had lied about everything. Their relationship had never ended. In fact, it had never really stopped. The betrayal was deeper than I could have ever imagined. But the shock didn't stop there. The more I dug into her past, the more I found connections to a much larger scheme. Money laundering, stolen cars, fake identities, all of it was tied to Gabriel and his underground operation. And Elena? She was more than just a bystander. She was complicit. I felt the floor beneath me begin to tilt. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I had trusted, wasn't the person I thought she was. She was a master manipulator, playing a game that I never even realized I was part of. And worse, she had used me as a pawn. But what hurt more than anything was the realization that this betrayal had been planned long before she left me. This wasn't some spontaneous decision she made out of a moment of weakness. No, Elena had been setting the stage for this for months. Gabriel had been feeding her information, getting her closer to me, and all the while, she was pretending to be the woman I loved. I couldn't let this stand. I had to find out how deep this went, what else she was hiding. But as I walked out of her office, determined to get to the bottom of it, I received a phone call that froze my blood. It was from the dealership. The Rolls Royce, it had been traced. And it was parked in an alley, burned to the ground. Elena and Gabriel were gone, and so was the car. They had vanished, and I was left with nothing but a pile of ashes and a feeling of dread crawling up my spine. I was no longer just a betrayed man. I was a man caught in a web of lies, criminals, and a betrayal that was far more dangerous than I had ever imagined. And now, I had to make a choice. Do I stay passive, or do I dig deeper into the shadowy world they were part of, risking everything to get back what was mine, and more? The answer was clear. I wasn't going to let them get away with this. Not now. Not ever. I thought the worst was behind me. But as I stood in the alley, staring at the charred remains of my stolen Rolls Royce, the realization hit me like a slap to the face: this wasn't just a robbery. It was a message. One I wasn't meant to understand. Yet, in some twisted way, I could feel the layers of betrayal deepening. Elena and Gabriel had disappeared, leaving nothing but smoke and ashes in their wake. And I was left to pick up the pieces of a life I no longer recognized. But it didn't end there. As the days went on, I learned that my tangled web of betrayal didn't stop with Elena or Gabriel. It ran much deeper, through people I thought I could trust, people I had never imagined would turn on me. The first complication came from an unlikely source: Rachel, my business partner. Rachel had been with me through everything, from the early days of the dealership when we were scraping by, to the moment we made our first real sale. She was like a sister to me. Or so I thought. She called me one evening, her voice sounding shaky on the other end of the line. "We need to talk," she said, but her tone made my skin crawl. There was an urgency in her voice, a panic that I couldn't quite place. When we met at the office, I could see it in her eyes immediately. The hesitation. The way her hands trembled slightly as she handed me an envelope. "I didn't know who else to turn to," she whispered, her voice cracking. The envelope contained a set of documents that left me breathless. The first document was a contract I had never signed, and one I had no memory of. It was an agreement between Rachel and a mysterious third party, a person I had never heard of before. The deal was straightforward. Rachel had agreed to sell me out, to provide information on the dealership's operations, in exchange for a substantial amount of money. "Rachel, what is this?" I whispered, the betrayal hitting me like a sucker punch. She looked away, unable to meet my eyes. I didn't want to do it. I didn't have a choice. I was in debt, deep debt. I didn't know who else to turn to. They threatened me, Luke. They threatened to hurt my family. My heart pounded in my chest as the realization sank in. Rachel had been playing me for months, feeding information about the dealership to Gabriel's network. She wasn't just a business partner. She was an accomplice, a traitor hidden in plain sight. But what hurt most was that I had trusted her. She was one of the few people I had believed would always have my back, and yet, here she was, standing in front of me, complicit in the destruction of everything I had worked for. I felt sick to my stomach. "So you knew about the car?" I asked, barely able to speak. "You knew about everything? About Elena?" She nodded, her eyes filled with guilt and fear. "I didn't want to be involved, Luke. But Gabriel offered me a way out. A way to save myself. I didn't know how to say no. I was scared. I was weak. I wanted to scream at her. To throw her out of my life and never speak to her again. But something inside me told me I needed her, her information, her inside knowledge of Gabriel's operation. I had no choice but to keep her close, at least for now. "You're going to help me fix this, Rachel," I said, my voice cold and calculated. "You're going to tell me everything you know. And if you don't, I swear, I'll make sure they regret ever getting involved with me." Rachel's face paled. "I'll tell you everything," she promised, her voice shaking. "Just please, don't hurt me. I never wanted any of this. I just wanted to get out of debt." I nodded, my anger simmering just below the surface. But before I could say anything else, Rachel grabbed my arm and pulled me into a tighter circle. "Luke," she said, her voice low and urgent. "There's something you need to know. Something you won't like." "What is it?" I asked, my pulse quickening. "Gabriel wasn't the only one involved in this deal," she whispered, glancing over her shoulder to make sure no one else was listening. "There's someone else pulling the strings, someone much closer to you than you think." At that moment, the world seemed to tilt. I froze, unable to comprehend what Rachel was implying. "Who?" I asked, my voice barely audible. She hesitated for a long moment before answering, her words dropping like bombs into my mind. "Your father. Your father is involved, Luke. He's been working with Gabriel from the start." My mind went blank. My father. The man I had admired my entire life. The man who had been my role model, my mentor, the one who had taught me the value of hard work and integrity. How could this be possible? How could the man who raised me, the man who had always been my moral compass, be tangled in this web of crime and corruption? It felt like my entire world was shattering around me. "Your father's been laundering money through your dealership," Rachel continued, her voice low. "The stolen cars, the fake identities, it's all part of a much bigger operation. Gabriel's not just after the cars, Luke. He's using them as a cover for a larger scheme. And your father's been helping him." I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. My mind raced in 1,000 directions, all of them spiraling into chaos. The man I had trusted most in this world, the one person I thought would never betray me, had been playing a part in the destruction of my life. How had I missed this? How had I been so blind? As I stood there, trying to process the enormity of what Rachel had just revealed, I realized something else. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about survival. Gabriel, Elena, Rachel, and now my own father, they had all conspired against me. And the only way to take them down was to fight fire with fire. I couldn't trust anyone anymore. Not even the people who had been by my side from the beginning. But one thing was clear, this war wasn't over. In fact, it had only just begun. The moment Rachel told me about my father's involvement in the scheme, a fire ignited inside me. The betrayal was deeper than I could have ever imagined. This wasn't just about Elena and Gabriel anymore. This was about my life. My legacy. My future. And the more I thought about it, the clearer it became, I had to hit them where it hurt the most. I had to take back control. But I would do it in a way they would never see coming. The first step was to regain my footing. My dealership was a key part of their plan. Without it, Gabriel and my father wouldn't have a way to funnel stolen cars or launder money. I needed to find a way to take the dealership back, without tipping them off. Without showing my hand. I couldn't do it alone, though. Rachel was terrified, constantly looking over her shoulder, but she was my only ally, and I wasn't about to let her off the hook just yet. I had to use her, manipulate her fear into something useful. But I also needed more intel. I needed to know how deep my father's involvement went and how Gabriel had managed to infiltrate my life so thoroughly. For the next few days, I laid low. I kept up appearances, pretending like everything was fine, even though inside I was brimming with rage. I knew they were watching me, waiting for me to make a move. I wasn't going to give them that satisfaction. Instead, I quietly worked on my plan, gathering every bit of information I could. Every detail. Every weak link in their chain. Rachel, as terrified as she was, couldn't ignore the fear that gripped her whenever she was around me. She had given me the information I needed about my father's involvement, but she didn't know how to extricate herself from the mess she had created. It was clear she felt guilty, but guilt wouldn't save her. I needed her to do something far more difficult, betray Gabriel, betray her own loyalty to my father. She had to give me something big. Something that would break them all. The first part of the plan involved the dealership. I knew there was an account my father had been using to move money, and I also knew that Gabriel had been using it to fund their criminal operations. I didn't have direct access to it, but I had an idea. If I could hack into the dealership system and reroute a transfer, I could make them believe that I had gone rogue, turning my back on everything I'd worked for. But that wasn't my endgame. No, my real goal was to let them think they had me cornered, to make them underestimate me. Because the moment they did that, I'd have them exactly where I wanted. With Rachel's help, I learned that Gabriel was planning a massive shipment of luxury cars. A network of buyers was lined up, ready to pay top dollar for them. What they didn't know was that one of the cars in that shipment was a car I'd had my eyes on for years, a limited edition Porsche that had been stolen from the dealership months ago. It was a key piece of the puzzle. I needed it back, not just for sentimental reasons, but because it represented the final piece of the larger operation. If I could get that car into my hands, I would have undeniable leverage over Gabriel. As I prepared for the execution of my plan, I couldn't help but think about Elena. She had been the spark that lit this fire, but now, I couldn't let her cloud my judgment. I had to focus. I couldn't afford to get lost in emotions anymore. The betrayal I felt toward her was a bitter one, but I would take it out on her in a way she'd never expect. I wouldn't just ruin her life. I'd ruin her perception of everything she'd ever believed in. By now, I'd gathered the intel I needed. I knew where the cars were being stored, I knew Gabriel's safe house location, and I knew enough about my father's criminal dealings to understand the risk they were both willing to take. What I didn't know was how deep Elena's loyalty to Gabriel ran. I had to assume she was just as complicit as the rest of them, but I couldn't trust her anymore. I had to assume that when the time came, she would be the one to put the final nail in my coffin. And when I confronted her, she would either help me or destroy me. The day of the heist, I felt every emotion coursing through me: fear, anger, hatred, and something else too. A strange calm. A deep resolve. I wasn't doing this just for revenge anymore. I was doing this for my future. For my freedom. And for the man I used to be before this entire nightmare began. Rachel and I had mapped out the entire plan. She would be the one to lead me into the safe house under the guise of helping Gabriel with a new deal. Once inside, I'd find the Porsche. I'd take it, destroy the evidence of its connection to the dealership, and send a message loud and clear. As for Gabriel, I wasn't just going to take him down. I was going to make him think I had turned against everyone, that I had become just as ruthless as he was. The plan was set, and there was no turning back. The night of the operation, my heart pounded in my chest. We entered Gabriel's safe house, under the cover of darkness, and I could feel the tension in the air like a palpable weight. Rachel, nervous but determined, led the way, and I followed, keeping my eyes peeled for any sign of danger. Every step I took brought me closer to the moment I had been waiting for. Every second made my pulse race faster. Gabriel wasn't there. He had been tipped off that someone was coming for him. But it didn't matter. What mattered was that the Porsche was there. In the garage. Sitting there like the prize it was. I moved fast. Too fast. Before I knew it, I was behind the wheel of the car, my hands shaking as I tried to steady myself. I had it. I had the leverage I needed. But as I prepared to drive it out, I heard a sound behind me. Footsteps. I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat. And there she was. Elena. She looked at me, eyes wide with shock, her voice trembling. "Luke, what are you doing?" I took a deep breath, my mind racing. This was it. The moment I'd been dreading and longing for. "You should have never left me, Elena," I said, my voice low and steady. "You should have never betrayed me. But now you'll see what happens when you do." She took a step back, her face stricken with guilt. "I never wanted this to happen, Luke." "You did," I interrupted, my words cutting through the tension like a knife. "You always did. You just didn't think I'd find out." And then, at that moment, I understood. The emotional weight of everything she'd put me through, flooded over me. But in my heart, I knew I wasn't the victim anymore. I had become the man they least expected. I had become the one who would tear their world apart. With a final, decisive motion, I drove the Porsche out of the garage, leaving Elena and her broken promises behind me. But this was only the beginning. The end was coming. And when it did, Gabriel and my father would regret ever thinking they could betray me. The Porsche roared as I sped down the darkened street, leaving Gabriel's safe house, and Elena, behind me. The tires screeched against the pavement as the cold night air whipped through the open windows, but I didn't feel the chill. I didn't feel anything, except a deep, satisfying sense of control. I had done it. I had outsmarted them all. The dealership was mine again, the stolen Porsche was safely in my possession, and my father? Well, he hadn't been a part of the final confrontation, but he'd soon find out that his own son wasn't someone to be underestimated. I had taken everything back from them, not just the material things, but the most important thing of all, my life. As I parked the Porsche in a hidden garage, I allowed myself a moment of quiet reflection. The betrayal from Elena, Gabriel, and my own father had nearly broken me, but now, standing in front of the car I had rightfully reclaimed, I realized that this was no longer about revenge. This was about reclaiming the power they had stolen from me. I wasn't the naive businessman who trusted too easily anymore. I was someone who had been tested by the darkest corners of human nature, and came out stronger for it. Elena's betrayal had cut deep, and while the anger had burned hot, there was no satisfaction in it now. I had won, but the victory felt hollow. I had taken down their empire, piece by piece, but I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that the battle was far from over. They might have underestimated me, but they wouldn't stay down forever. Gabriel and my father were still out there, somewhere, licking their wounds. I couldn't afford to rest. Not yet. They had hurt me once, and I knew that if I let my guard down, they would strike again. The real war hadn't even begun. I was left standing at the precipice of something much bigger than I could have imagined. As I locked the garage and walked back to my apartment, I couldn't help but wonder, what had driven my father to betray me? What had happened to the man who had taught me everything about business, about integrity? What would I have to do to stop him? And Elena. What about her? She had been my everything. Now, she was a ghost. I couldn't imagine a life without her, but the truth was, I wasn't the same man who had fallen in love with her. I had to accept that, no matter how much it hurt. Her betrayal had destroyed whatever was left of the person I used to be, and though I had the power to crush her, I wondered, did I even want to anymore? As I lay in bed that night, the sound of the wind outside my window nothing more than a whisper, I couldn't shake the questions gnawing at me. Gabriel and my father had destroyed the life I'd built, but in doing so, they had created something else, something darker, something more dangerous. The stakes were higher than ever. And while I had won this battle, I knew it was only a matter of time before they came after me again. I wasn't done with them. Not by a long shot. As the camera zooms in on me, sitting silently in the darkened room, the screen fades to black. A message flashes on the screen. Revenge is never as sweet as it seems. But just when I thought I had finished taking down the empire that betrayed me, the truth came crashing in. There's more at stake than I realized, more players in the game, more betrayals lurking in the shadows. And this time, it's not just about me anymore. Stay tuned for the next chapter. Because the real game begins now. If you thought this was the end, think again. Subscribe, like, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next chapter. Because the war isn't over, and neither is the betrayal. You won't want to miss what happens next. Trust me.